In the autumn of 539 BCE, Babylon was untouchable. Towering walls, fortified gates, and a river running through its heart made the city seem invincible. For generations, it stood as the most powerful city in the known world. But one night, it fell, not with a roar, but with silence. Cyrus of Persia, a man who had already united the Medes and Persians under his rule, approached Babylon with an army. But instead of launching a full-scale assault, he studied the city carefully. Babylon's walls were high and thick, and the great Euphrates River ran straight through it, both a defense and a weakness. Cyrus ordered his engineers to begin digging, miles upstream. They carved out channels to divert the Euphrates into a marshy basin, slowly lowering the river's level that passed under the city's massive gates. It wasn't a single-night effort, it took planning, labor, and careful timing. Then came the moment. Babylon was celebrating a major festival. Most likely the annual New Year celebration, when the city was distracted by music, wine, and rituals that filled the streets and temples. The soldiers and guards were off duty. The gates were left lightly defended. As the water dropped below the level of the river gates, Cyrus's troops slipped into the city through the dried riverbed. They didn't scale walls. They didn't burn bridges. They walked, silently, through the gap left by water. The city was taken without a major battle. There was no massacre. No looting. No burning. In fact, historical records, including Babylonian chronicles, describe how Cyrus respected the local priests and temples. The priests themselves welcomed him as a liberator. He restored religious practices and brought calm where there had been fear. It was one of the most peaceful captures of a major city in ancient history. And this was the beginning of one of the greatest acts of kindness ever recorded. Hi there. You're here. And that's enough. Now, gently lie down. Find your most comfortable position. Let your body sink into the bed. Close your eyes, and take a slow breath in. And out. Tonight, we're not rushing. We're not thinking about tomorrow. We're simply letting go. And now, as the world gets quiet, it's time to listen. Not to noise, but to something soft. Something kind. This is the next episode in our series of true kindness stories. Carefully chosen, just for you. So rest easy. And let your heart feel lighter. As we begin tonight's story. For 70 years, the Jewish people had been living in exile in Babylon. Their city, Jerusalem, had been destroyed by King Nebuchadnezzar. Their temple, the very heart of their faith, had been reduced to rubble. Many were taken from their homeland and forced to settle in a place far from their traditions, their language, and their sacred lands. They lived as strangers. Their prayers longed for home. And they waited, for decades, for someone, anyone, to offer them a path back. That path came with Cyrus. When Cyrus entered Babylon, Jewish elders waited anxiously to see how this new ruler would treat them. Would he continue the same oppression? Would he ignore their hopes? But Cyrus did something no one expected. He issued a royal decree that allowed the Jewish people to return to their homeland. It wasn't just a statement, it was an imperial order backed by action. He gathered the sacred vessels of the destroyed temple, gold and silver items that Nebuchadnezzar had stolen, and returned them to the Jewish leaders. He gave permission to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, And he supported the effort with funds, resources, and protection. This moment, this single declaration, gave birth to a new chapter in Jewish history, the return from exile. It wasn't just political freedom. It was spiritual restoration. Thousands of people began to prepare for the journey. And they did so with hope, not because of a prophet or a priest, but because of a Persian king. As word of Cyrus's decree spread, the reaction across the empire was swift and emotional. For the Jewish exiles, who had only known Babylon as their home, the thought of returning to Jerusalem stirred a flood of memories and dreams. Jewish leaders such as Zerubbabel and Jeshua began organizing the people. Families packed up their belongings. Priests collected records, scrolls, and religious items that had survived exile. Skilled laborers prepared tools for the monumental task ahead. Rebuilding their sacred temple from rubble. The decree wasn't symbolic. It was structured. Cyrus ordered his treasurers to count and return the exact number of temple items taken from Jerusalem, 5,400 articles of gold and silver. These were handed over to Sheshbazzar, the appointed governor of the returning community. In addition, Cyrus commanded the neighboring peoples to support the returning exiles with freewill offerings, silver, goods, animals, and additional treasures. The community mobilized, and their Babylonian neighbors gave generously. Even those who did not return played a part in rebuilding the holy city. Every part of the decree was followed through with precision. Cyrus's commitment didn't end with words, it was enforced with systems, supplies, and leadership. His kindness was not abstract. It was a sequence of real, material actions that moved thousands of lives and reshaped a nation's future. And so, they set out. Thousands of families, led by priests, elders, and governors, began the long journey from Babylon to Jerusalem. It was not an easy road. The path crossed deserts, rivers, and dangerous terrain. The journey stretched nearly 1,000 miles. They brought with them everything they could carry: tools, scrolls, heirlooms, musical instruments, sacred items, and children who had never seen the land of their ancestors. Elderly men who thought they'd never leave Babylon walked beside toddlers who would become the first generation born in a free Jerusalem. Cyrus ensured their safety. He assigned escorts to protect the travelers through regions that were lawless and often hostile. He gave them letters of passage to be shown at checkpoints. The journey took months, but it was guided and supported by the empire that once held them captive. Along the way, the travelers stopped to rest, pray, and rebuild hope. Some villages they passed through offered food or shelter. Others simply stood and watched in awe, witnessing an exiled people returning home by the order of a foreign king. By the time they reached Jerusalem, the city was a ruin. Rubble covered the Temple Mount. Houses had collapsed. Streets were wild with overgrowth. But they were home. They pitched tents. They built altars. And they began, stone by stone, to rebuild not just a temple, but a nation. This journey, dangerous, historic, and unforgettable, was only possible because Cyrus saw their exile not as a political issue, but as a human one. He didn't just give them permission. He gave them protection, supplies, sacred items, and the right to believe, build, and belong. Cyrus's kindness wasn't reserved for one people. His rule echoed across vast lands, and wherever his empire spread, his policies of tolerance and restoration followed. In Babylon, he met with priests from many temples, not just the Jewish elders. He listened. He asked questions. He understood what the gods of each city meant to its people. Then he gave orders. Sacred statues that had been stolen by previous kings, taken as trophies and displayed in foreign lands, were to be returned to their original temples. In Uar, in Susa, in Ecbatana, statues of Ishtar, Marduk, and other gods were carried back to their sanctuaries. Priests wept with joy. Festivals were held in honor of their return. Cyrus was not imposing the Persian god Ahura Mazda upon these cities, he was restoring each people's sacred identity. This act, returning religious icons, was revolutionary for the time. Most conquerors desecrated foreign temples to show dominance. But Cyrus did the opposite. He rebuilt them. He funded restorations. He sent artisans to help where local resources were too weak. Cyrus also issued decrees ensuring that local customs, laws, and governance were respected. While he appointed Persian satraps as governors, he allowed regions to maintain their own officials and traditions. In Lydia, the Lydian language was preserved. In Babylon, cuneiform continued to be used in legal documents. In Judea, the Hebrew calendar was honored. He was building not an empire of sameness, but of inclusion. And his people loved him for it. From the Zagros Mountains to the Aegean coast, he was not feared as a tyrant. He was respected as a liberator. Even enemies marveled at his methods. Greek historians, whose people often fought Persians, wrote of Cyrus with admiration. Xenophon called him an ideal ruler, and Herodotus chronicled his fairness. In every corner of his realm, there were acts of kindness that shaped lives: a child in Babylon who saw their God returned, a farmer in Judea rebuilding under protection, a temple priest in Elam blessing the name of a Persian king. These were not one-time gestures. They were Cyrus's policy. A kindness written into the very structure of his empire. As Cyrus grew older, he continued to travel his empire. He was not a king who ruled from a golden throne far from his people. He visited cities. He heard complaints. He issued justice personally. His presence was not feared, it was welcomed. One day, in a quiet region of Persia near the city of Pasargadae, he ordered the construction of something humble. A tomb. Not a towering ziggurat, not a mountain palace, a simple, elegant stone monument with 7 ascending steps. On it, a short inscription. "O man, I am Cyrus, who founded the empire of the Persians. Do not begrudge me this little earth that covers my body." This was how the man who had liberated Babylon, freed a nation, and returned gods to their temples, wished to be remembered. After his death, the empire mourned. In Babylon, the priests held rituals. In Judea, the elders read his decree with reverence. In Anatolia, Lydia, and Sogdia, communities marked his passing with respect. And his tomb, still standing today, became a place of quiet pilgrimage. Centuries later, when Alexander the Great conquered Persia, he made a special journey to that tomb. Alexander removed his helmet, stepped inside, and reportedly wept. He ordered the tomb to be repaired and guarded. Why? Because even in conquest, Cyrus was remembered not just as a ruler, but as a just man who changed the lives of those he never even met. His kindness had not been erased by time. It lived on in memories, rituals, and ruins. And in stone, on a high plain under the sky, lay the resting place of one of history's gentlest conquerors. The man who won not just battles, but hearts. Long after Cyrus was gone, his influence rippled through centuries. The decree he made, allowing exiles to return and rebuild, became more than a historical document. It was echoed in other civilizations as a model of enlightened leadership. It laid one of the first foundations for human rights. Centuries later, a clay cylinder inscribed with his words was uncovered in the ruins of Babylon. Today known as the Cyrus cylinder, it details his respect for local religions and peoples. It has been called the world's first charter of human rights. It now rests in the British Museum, a symbol of tolerance from a time often remembered only for conquest. In Jewish history, Cyrus was not seen as a foreign king, he was remembered as Cyrus the Anointed, a title rarely given to non-Jewish figures. His name appears in the book of Isaiah, not as an enemy, but as a chosen instrument of divine will. No other Gentile ruler is spoken of in such terms. Modern leaders, too, have recognized his legacy. The founding fathers of the United States read and admired stories of Cyrus. Thomas Jefferson owned multiple copies of Xenophon's Cyropaedia, a Greek account praising Cyrus's leadership. Political thinkers across time studied his balance of strength and mercy. The Persian Empire he founded eventually gave way to others, but the moral imprint of his reign endured. Wherever there are people yearning for freedom, Cyrus's story reminds them that even the most powerful ruler can act with humility, compassion, and grace. His legacy is not just carved in stone or written in books, it is etched in the lives of the people he liberated, and in the hearts of those who still look to history for hope. Cyrus the Great was not perfect, but in an age of empires, he chose a path rarely walked, the path of kindness. Today, thousands of years later, the name of Cyrus still lingers, not in chants of war or legends of conquest, but in the quiet tales of freedom and restoration. In classrooms, his policies are studied. In museums, his cylinder is preserved under glass. In the ruins of Babylon and the stones of Pasargadae, his choices echo through the silence. More importantly, in stories of compassion told under soft lamplight, or whispered to children drifting to sleep, his actions live again. The return of sacred objects, the rebuilding of a temple, the freedom to pray, these are not just ancient memories. They are timeless examples of leadership through empathy. In a world that still struggles with division, exile, and oppression, the legacy of Cyrus offers something rare, proof that power can be used to heal. Let his story be a reminder that even the mightiest rulers are remembered not for how many lands they conquered, but for how many lives they lifted. And so, as the night deepens, may we carry this kindness forward. Not just as history, but as hope. Sleep well.